Hi, I'm so excited to be here today to share the work that we did with Telstra to change the status quo in inclusion for our 2.36 million Australians with low English literacy. Let's start with some background. The digital economy in Australia has been expanding over many years. Government, education, and businesses have been moving their services online to stay relevant and accessible. The events that COVID-19 brought about last year, such as homeschooling and remote consultations, has meant that more and more people have come to rely on these online services for their everyday needs. Being online is no longer a want. It's a necessity. Not all Australians can access these services online though. Very real barriers exist that exclude them from our digital economy. While this is a worrying concern, it also represents an opportunity to leverage technology on a large scale to solve for digital inclusion. So, when Abigail Bryden, Telstra's Digital Inclusion Senior Specialist, came to us at AWS with a big vision to break down the digital barriers of inclusion, it was a challenge that we were excited to accept. My name is Chitra Krita. I'm a prototyping engagement manager at AWS and am passionate about helping customers unblock and accelerate their innovation journey through prototyping so that they can deliver value faster. I'm thrilled to be joined by Abigail Bryden. Abby has spent her career at Telstra leveraging and rallying the significant capabilities that Telstra offers to not only understand what digital inclusion looks like in Australia, but to partner with government, not-for-profits and other corporates to improve digital inclusion outcomes for all Australians. Today, Abby and I will talk about Telstra's inclusion journey and how prototyping was involved.
Thanks, Chitra. It's great to be here today. One of my key pieces of work is Telstra's Australian Digital Inclusion Index, and this is where this journey begins. Before I move into describing the problem that we were seeking to solve, I'm going to very briefly discuss digital inclusion. The easiest way to think about digital inclusion is in terms of the benefit an individual receives from the internet. It is widely recognised that having access to the internet provides a person with great benefit. However, having access alone does not guarantee that they will automatically receive this benefit. It is also important to consider what types of devices a person uses to access the internet, whether it's just a mobile phone or is it a laptop, the cost of that access, as this determines the amount of data and the speed of the internet connection, and a person's digital skills, as this influences what activities can be done. Combined, all of these factors determine what benefit a person can receive from the internet. Telstra's Digital Inclusion Index considers these dimensions of access, affordability and digital ability and benchmarks digital inclusion around Australia. The index enables us to compare Australians' digital inclusion across the country, between different socio-demographic groups and over time. And this research allows us to explore and understand the barriers Australians face to interacting digitally. In 2019, as part of the index, we did a deep dive into the digital inclusion of a recent migrant community in Shepparton, which is in regional Victoria. This research found three things. Firstly, like the wider culturally and linguistically diverse community in Australia, we found that this community was very digitally included. They have lots of devices, lots of data, and were really tech savvy. Secondly, the research found that language was the barrier for many of the research participants to access services online. Many members of this community did not read or write in English. And thirdly, we found that translating the text of a website into a different language would not solve the problem, as 2/3 of the participants could not read or write in any language. As Chitra mentioned, low English literacy is not just a challenge facing the research participants in Shepparton. ABS data tells us that there are 2.36 million Australians with low levels of English literacy. This is almost 10% of the Australian population. For 826,000 of these Australians, English is not their first language. We all know that organisations are moving services online, and for good reason. For many customers, this makes accessing services much, much better. Customers can access services 24/7. It saves them time and effort and provides greater flexibility, all of which combine to produce a great customer experience. For businesses, digitisation saves money as it reduces the need for face-to-face or over-the-phone services, and it provides opportunities to find efficiencies in streamlining service delivery. However, for those that cannot interact with services digitally, online service provision creates a real barrier to access. As the number of shop fronts decline, for those with English literacy, there is an increased time burden. As they cannot interact with services online, people have to travel further to go to a shop front. Depending on where they live, for example, in a regional community, this could pose a real challenge. Alternatively, a customer could wait on the phone to speak to a consultant, which again puts the time burden on them if those wait times are long. Privacy can also be compromised because we know that customers look for a workaround and get their kids or a third party like the library or a neighbour, for example, to fill in online forms for them. And sharing passwords, payment information or personal information is high risk. For these customers, their customer experience is really poor. For businesses, it pushes up wait times for all people using non-digital options. Consultants spend their time with simple queries rather than focusing on the more complex issues, which will always need to be dealt with face-to-face or over the phone. The sharing of personal data with a third party creates privacy risks for the business. And importantly, a poor customer experience damages the business's reputation. It is important to note here that many of the barriers to digital inclusion that Australians face are not actually technical. For example, the key challenge for many Australians is affordability. However, for this problem, a technical solution is possible. The barrier here is not getting online or digital literacy, it is simply the language of the website. Not being able to read or write in English makes interacting with online services in English problematic. And this is what brought me to AWS. AWS are leaders in translation technology, leaders in voice technology, and are also long-term partners with Telstra. So I reached out late in 2019 to see if there was an opportunity to work together to solve this problem. And the challenge that I posed to the prototyping team was this. Firstly, can we change the way customers interact with websites? Could we provide customers with the option to listen and to talk to a website rather than read and type? Secondly, can we provide a customer with the flexibility in the language of the website? Can we enable a customer to be able to pick a language of their choice when using a website rather than being forced to interact in English? Thirdly, the solution has to be easily integrated into any existing website without the requirement for significant changes, because this would be a barrier for businesses to adopt. And fourthly, the solution needs to be dynamic. Once enabled, it needs to translate whatever text on the page is on the page and not require constant updates to this translation, as again, this would be a barrier to adoption by business.
We love a challenge, and Abby, you set the bar high. Often, prototyping customers like Abby come to us with really ambitious things in the emerging technology space. And we often hear from them that the path to execute and deliver them can seem unclear and at times improbable. This is why within AWS we established a prototyping function. We're obsessed about helping customers like Telstra envision the art of the possible And we do this by building prototypes that bring together complex use cases of the AWS platform to solve business problems. So what is AWS prototyping? Prototyping means many things to many people. So to make sure we're all on the same page, let's define some terms. Typically, demo has a limited scope and demonstrates a single or very few functionalities outside of a business context. A proof of concept expands on this, but it's still primarily outside of the context of business benefits. A prototype for my team proves technology feasibility in the context of business benefits. It is custom built using AWS services to solve specific use cases, and it's measured by the business outcomes it helps customers achieve. Now, let's get stuck into our prototyping journey with Telstra. At AWS, we always start by working backwards from the person at the very end of the customer experience who derives value from a solution. In other words, we work backwards from the end customer. So with Telstra, our prototyping journey kicked off with a series of workshops to dive deep and really understand what Abby spoke about earlier on the vision, business problem and outcome, and the technology uncertainties she faced. This gave us clarity in thinking and made sure we were focusing on the end customer. After that came the fun part of brainstorming ideas for solutions. We sketched out 8 big ideas in 8 minutes by thinking differently and looking around corners for ways to serve customers. We then picked an idea that we believed customers would appreciate the most. We thought about the idea's end-to-end customer flow and sketched out how a customer would discover the solution, how they would use it, and what the end customer experience would look like. We found that the most important benefit that the idea offered was that it enabled customers to use their voice to access online services in their language of choice. So we hypothesized that if we could build an easily integratable voice-first solution that connects website content to translation services, then this will result in widespread adoption of the technology across websites. This in turn will enable and empower Australians with low levels of English literacy to independently access online services. We obviously had many assumptions about the idea at this point and needed data to test this hypothesis. And what better way to do that than to run a quick experiment through prototyping? We first needed a mechanism that allowed us to do rapid experimentation at low cost, and the AWS platform was great for this. The AWS free tier made it easy and quick for us to access an extensive range of services at low to no cost. We also very quickly found that all the building blocks required to build the prototype were at our fingertips in the form of machine learning services on the AWS platform. We just needed to pull them together into a solution that delivered value for Telstra. So that's exactly what we did. As Abby mentioned earlier, the functional requirements for the prototype were clear. Customers should be able to hear website content in their language of choice. They should also be able to speak to a website in their language of choice. To do this, we needed automatic speech to convert voice to text. We needed a neural machine translation to convert that text between languages. And we needed neural text-to-speech to convert text into audio. In the past, all of this would have been complex, expensive, and time-consuming. Developers would have needed to build models that support these requirements. They would have then had to train these models to make prediction, tune them for the best possible predictions, And finally, integrate and deploy the models in their application on infrastructure that scales. Fortunately, AWS's broadest and deepest set of machine learning services allowed us to eliminate a large amount of this undifferentiated heavy lifting. From Amazon SageMaker for developing high-quality machine learning models, to Amazon Personalize for delivering personalized experiences and recommendations. We had a ton of technologies to experiment with. For the prototype, we landed on using Amazon Polly to read text out aloud, Amazon Translate to translate between languages, and Amazon Transcribe Streaming to take spoken words and turn them into text in real time. It was super easy to build on the pre-trained models that these Amazon services provided. All we had to do was take all our calls to their extensive APIs and wrap them into a custom standalone JavaScript SDK that ran in the browser upon completion of a page load. We did not need containers, EC2 instances, or AWS Lambda. And better yet, it was easily pluggable into websites. Security matters, and hence we used Amazon Cognito to secure the access to the services using temporary authentication credentials. Throughout the journey, it was really enjoyable to collaborate closely with Abby and her team. We did this through stand-ups, showcases, and informal chats. We continually learned, pivoted, and improved the prototype from feedback. Within 6 weeks, we went from a vision to an impactful prototype that we delivered to Abby. The prototype not only read website content out loud in a chosen language, it could also listen to speech in that language and translate it to English as input into the website. Let me show you what I mean.
欢迎使用 Tastra 积极反馈和建议表，语音协助已启用。你想分享什么？
客户服务非常满意。
你想联系吗？你对你想联系吗？这个问题回答了否？
I've seen that demo many times, and I find it really awesome every single time. To help a customer navigate through an English website, the prototype read out the text selected by the customer in a language of the customer's choice, which in this case was Mandarin, as you saw. It then heard and translated the Mandarin spoken response of the customer into English for input into the website. At the end, it allowed the customer to check and confirm their responses by translating and reading out the English inputs back in Mandarin. Behind the scenes, the prototype easily integrated into the website and dynamically translated website content as it changed. If you remember, Abby spoke earlier about changing the way customers interact with websites. This prototype demonstrates that that is no doubt possible to do.
That's right, Chitra. The prototype definitely met the challenge I posed. This solution really enables customers to overcome the barrier of low English literacy and engage with services digitally. This solution also solves many of the service problems we identified earlier that this cohort faces. It saves time, as customers would no longer have to go to a shop front or wait on the phone to access services. It reduces the need to share private information with a third party for translation purposes and therefore protects their personal data. With this solution, like the rest of Australia, this cohort could now engage with services digitally when and where is convenient to them. For businesses, as more customers can interact digitally, it will reduce wait times at shop fronts or on the phone. The solution is easy to integrate into existing websites and it is dynamic. Once enabled, when the text on the website is updated, so too is the translation. And as we all know, excellent customer experiences leads to excellent business reputations. So what's next? Well, this journey is still ongoing. From the prototype, we developed an MVP, which was very successful. And from there, we are now validating the solution to understand if and how it can be incorporated into the Telstra website. I need to call out that the pathway to get this from an idea to production is not straightforward. But then changing the status quo and pushing technology in a direction that hasn't been taken yet was always going to be a challenge. But we are working through these challenges, so watch this space.
Abby, it's great to see Telstra and yourself progressing towards making this vision a reality. On our side, we loved working on this prototype with you and the Telstra team. It was incredibly rewarding to take an audacious vision, dive deep to decompose it into a series of experiments, pull together all the AWS building blocks, and deliver value through an impactful prototype. For us at Amazon, inclusion matters. We felt very privileged to be part of the Telstra journey, to break down barriers to inclusion, and in turn, deliver long-term value for our community. I remember, Abby, when we were reflecting on inclusion a while ago, we related it back to this concept of equality of access. A door provides equal access to everyone, regardless of their age, culture, or linguistic background. We need more doors, digital doors, for the web. So here's my call to action for you. I invite you to build that digital door today. We have all the technology at AWS ready for you to do great things with. So look around the corners, innovate, and find ways to make people's lives easier. And if you need any help at all doing that, check out our training courses and acceleration programs, or simply reach out to your AWS contact or account manager. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give feedback. Thank you for watching.